All right, I've decided that my house is worth $50 million. Now, I guess I can officially declare myself a multimillionaire now. I'm going to get a loan based on that because my house is now worth $50 million because I say so. And with that $50 million loan, like Donald Trump does, I'm going to live high on the hog. I will fly around in private jets. I will have chauffeurs take me everywhere. You know, I might even buy a fancier house with that $50 million loan. Obviously, I'm tongue-in-cheek here, but that's literally what Trump did. You know, like Trump Towers, his apartment in Trump Towers worth like $20 million. He claimed it was worth $400 million. He just made stuff up. I mean, this is Judge Engoron said that he engaged in a persistent fraud. His lawyers engaged in obstreperous behavior. It was pure sophistry, what he was saying. He said it's wholly without basis in law or fact. And he said it invokes the time loop in the film Groundhog Day. One of the footnotes, footnote number 9, the judge actually quoted the Marx Brothers. That old line from Duck Soup, I think it is, where he said, "Who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes?" And in footnote number 10, and this is a lot more serious, and frankly, I don't think it's being given the attention or the importance that it should in the mainstream media. Donald Trump claimed that he could inflate the value of, for example, his apartment. He could say the $20 million apartment was worth $400 million because, and I quote, "A buyer from Saudi Arabia will pay any price I ask." Now, the judge noted that. And he said, and I think this is probably the understatement of the decade. He said, "This statement may suggest influence buying more than savvy investing." You think? You help the Crown Prince get away with murdering a Washington Post writer? You over the objections of the Pentagon and Congress, you sell multiple weapon systems to Saudi Arabia? You elevate them to very, very high status on the world. Give your son-in-law $2 billion. They give your billionaire former Treasury Secretary $1 billion. They give Donald hundreds of millions, presumably. Nobody knows the amount, but the Live Golf Tour, I mean, you know, they offered Tiger Woods almost $1 billion. They're holding them at Donald's properties. How much money is he getting for that? God only knows. But the judge has called him out. The judge has basically said, this is all about the lawsuit that Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, started. Trump always calls her a racist. He has 2 words for black people, racist and thug. That's his code for black people. And, you know, so Letitia James started this case in 2019. We are 4 years into it. She says that he inflated his net worth by at least $2.2 billion. This judge from New York. Now, this is how this worked. You know, you imagine this. You have been charged with a crime. Now, this is a civil case. I realize there's a difference here, and I'm going to use language that doesn't quite apply to civil cases, and I'll clean that up afterwards. But just imagine you've been accused of a crime, and you go into court expecting to have a trial, and the judge looks at the discovery, you know, of your side and the prosecutor's side, and looks it over and says, "Holy crap, there's so much evidence here. We don't need a trial. I'm going to just say that you're guilty. You have no defense. This evidence is irrefutable. Off to prison with you." Well, that's essentially what happened yesterday. It wasn't, you don't use the word guilty, you use the word liable because it's a civil proceeding, not a criminal proceeding. But basically what the judge did is he said, we don't need a trial on this. Any idiot can look at this and see that Trump lied to all these banks and insurance companies and that is fraud on its face. So let's just skip to the part where we decide how many years in jail he gets, which is what it would be if it was criminal proceeding. But again, because this is a civil proceeding, it's going to be how much is the fine going to be, and what other penalties For example, losing his license to do business, or his ability to have a license to do business in New York State. And the judge has scheduled a hearing for that in just a couple weeks down the road. Now, Trump is going to appeal this. There's no doubt about that. He'll appeal it to the New York Supreme Court. This was a Supreme Court justice, by the way, Arthur Engron, who ruled in this case. But the trial, which was scheduled to go from October 2nd to December 22nd, the trial had been scheduled to run for 2 months, almost 2 months, 7 weeks. That trial's probably now going to last a week or two, because the whole, the 7 weeks, 6 of those 7 weeks, in all probability, were to determine whether Trump was guilty or liable, to use the proper language. And, the judge already decided that. Letitia James is asking for a $250 million fine. I am not certain, but I believe that is the maximum that she can ask for, or she would be asking for more. I mean, this is a $2.5 billion fraud. Arguably the largest fraud in the history of the United States. And again, why the media isn't characterizing it that way, I don't know. I'm scratching my head on this thing. Trump's lawyer, Christopher Kise, told the judge that Trump could inflate the value of his properties because he's, quote, an investment genius and probably one of the most successful real estate developers in the country. He's a master at finding value where others see nothing. Yep, my home is worth $50 million. The judge was having none of it. The judge said, quote, in defendant's world, well-regulated apartments, rent-regulated apartments are worth the same as unregulated apartments. Restricted land is worth the same as unrestricted land. Restrictions can evaporate into thin air. A disclaimer by one party casting responsibility on another party exonerates the other party's lies. He said, this is a fantasy world, not the real world. And by the way, this is just the beginning for Trump. In January, he's going to court in New York, E. Jean Carroll asking for another $10 million for his defamation. He's got 2 trials scheduled for March, one about Stormy Daniels and one about the January 6th insurrection. He's got a trial in Florida for his violations of the Espionage Act that they haven't come up with a date yet for, because Judge Eileen Cannon is doing everything she can to help him procrastinate, to stall it. And then there's another trial over the fraud in Georgia, and that trial date has not yet been set either. So a lot going on here.